There are moments in life when silence is not the absence of action, but the highest form of creation. Neville Goddard taught that your inner world is the workshop where every outer event is shaped, molded, and summoned into existence. To stay silent in particular moments is to withdraw your power from the world of shadows and return it to the realm of imagination, the only place where true change begins. Silence is not weakness, it is mastery. When you refrain from reacting, you are declaring that the world outside has no authority over the world within. You are choosing the unseen over the seen, the truth over appearances, the end over the means. In silence, you reclaim the throne of your consciousness. This teaching reminds you that your reactions are prayers. Every time you respond emotionally, you call forth a future aligned with that reaction. But when you stay silent, deliberately, consciously, with a vision held within, you rise above the noise and anchor yourself in the reality you desire to birth. It is in silence that imagination speaks, guidance flows, and creation happens. If you practice silence in the right moments, you will begin to see life bend toward you. Opportunities appear, conflicts dissolve, people change, and your circumstances rearrange themselves without force, because you changed first. Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness, as though nothing happens within it, but in truth silence is the womb of all creation. When you withdraw your voice, your reaction, your impulse to defend or explain, you are not shrinking. You are entering the inner sanctuary where power truly resides. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world is nothing more than the echo of inner states. It is not your words that change your life, but the consciousness from which those words arise. And so, the first moment to stay silent is the moment when you feel compelled to react. That impulse is a signal, not to speak, but to turn inward. To react is to give authority to the appearance before you. It is to declare, even unknowingly, this circumstance has power over me. But silence declares the opposite. Silence says, I choose my inner reality over the outer world. In that instant of restraint, you reclaim your creative dominion. You become the observer rather than the prisoner of circumstance. The world may demand your voice, your explanation, your defense, but you offer none. Not because you are weak, but because you know something greater. Imagination creates reality. When something in your outer world provokes you, it is merely a shadow, a reflection of old assumptions, old reactions, old states of being. Shadows have no substance. To argue with them is to argue with smoke. Neville would say, ignore the evidence of your senses when it contradicts your desire. Silence is that ignoring. It is the refusal to feed the unwanted with your energy. In silence, you starve the old state and nourish the new one. Consider how often we speak from fear, frustration, or insecurity. These words, invisible as they are, carry the vibration of the state from which they come. Every complaint reaffirms the problem. Every explanation reaffirms doubt. Every argument reaffirms separation. But silence cuts the thread, it stops the cycle. It allows you to take a breath and return to the awareness of your true identity, the one who commands reality from within. In silence, you can imagine freely. You can step into the version of yourself who has already received the desire. Without uttering a word, you can assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and in that assumption lies all the power. For the world will eventually conform to that assumption as faithfully as the mirror reflects your face. By staying silent, you are not holding back, you are planting seeds. You are allowing the unseen to grow without interference. When you react outwardly, you dissipate your energy. You scatter it across arguments, explanations, justifications. You spend your spiritual currency on things that do not matter. But when you remain silent, your energy gathers, concentrates, and strengthens. You become inwardly focused, inwardly poised, inwardly creative. And from that inner certainty, life bends to meet your new state of being. Silence is the place where you shift. It is where the transformation begins. When you hold your tongue in a moment of provocation, you create space. Space to choose a higher response. Space to realign with your ideal. Space to remember that you are not the victim of life, but the author of it. You become deliberate rather than reactive. You rise above the storm instead of being tossed by it. And in this silence, your imagination becomes clear. You begin to hear the still, small voice within. The voice Neville spoke of so often. It is not loud, dramatic, or demanding. It whispers. It guides gently. But you can only hear it when you stop speaking, when you stop reacting, when you stop engaging with the noise of the world. Silence is the doorway to that inner guidance, and once you enter, you are no longer governed by fear or confusion. To remain silent in moments of emotional charge is to stop the wheel of karma. Instead of perpetuating old states, you step into the timeless space where new states are selected. In silence, you can feel yourself into the reality you prefer. You can choose confidence over insecurity, abundance over lack, peace over conflict. You can embody the version of yourself who needs no defense because they are rooted in knowing, not reacting. Life will test your silence. It will bring situations that tug at your old patterns. People may misunderstand your quietness. They may expect you to react as you once did, but you will feel something different within you. A steady stillness, a deeper awareness, a quiet power. This is the sign that your consciousness is shifting. The old self argues, the awakened self understands. The old self defends, the awakened self creates. The old self reacts, the awakened self imagines. Silence begins as discipline, but it ends as liberation. You discover that you no longer need to prove anything. You no longer seek validation from the world outside. You no longer fight battles that do not exist except in old assumptions. Instead, you rest in the knowledge that imagination shapes reality, and your silence protects that creative process from disruption. As you practice staying silent in these crucial moments, life begins to reorganize itself. Conflicts disappear, opportunities emerge, people treat you differently, circumstances unfold with surprising ease, not because you forced anything, but because you mastered the only place where change truly happens, the inner world. Silence is your ally, your secret power, your spiritual armor. Use it not as avoidance, but as creation. Let the world interpret your silence however it wishes. You know the truth. Within your quietness lies the seed of a transformed reality. Remain silent when your old self wants to speak, and you will watch your outer world shift. Because in those moments when you choose silence, you choose yourself. You choose your future. You choose the reality you desire to experience. And life, faithful as always, will follow. There are moments in life when silence becomes the doorway through which you step into a new state of being. One of these sacred moments is when you feel the urge to justify yourself, to explain who you are, why you are, or what you are doing. This urge, subtle or intense, is a signal that you are moving from inner knowing to outer dependence. Neville Goddard taught that the moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, you have forgotten who you truly are. You have momentarily abandoned the divine authority within and handed your power to the opinions of others. The world, however, is not your master. It is your mirror. And mirrors are not to be argued with. They are to be transformed from within. Silence in moments of self-justification is not suppression. It is sovereignty. It is the quiet affirmation that your inner conviction is more real than the fleeting perceptions of others. When you refrain from explaining yourself, you anchor yourself in the truth that your experience is shaped not by negotiation with the world, but by alignment within. Every explanation you give arises from a state, and if the state is insecurity, fear, or doubt, then the explanation reinforces that state. Silence, on the other hand, breaks the spell. It returns you to the awareness that your imagination is the creative force, not the approval or understanding of anyone outside you. Most people speak to be seen, to be accepted, to be validated. They fear being misunderstood. But Neville taught a higher principle: you are not here to be understood. You are here to create. Creation requires inner conviction, not outer agreement. When you stay silent in the face of misunderstanding or criticism, you demonstrate a deep trust in your inner world. You say, without words, I am the operant power. And the world eventually reflects that certainty back to you. Think of how often the urge to explain arises from a place of insecurity. You want others to see your intentions, your worth, your decisions in a favorable light. Yet this very desire gives others power over your state. The moment you explain, you subtly declare that their perspective matters more than your inner knowing. But silence reclaims that authority. Silence says, I know who I am and I need no witness. When a person lives from inner conviction, their silence becomes magnetic. It draws respect, not because they demand it, but because they embody it. People feel the solidity of someone who does not scramble to justify themselves. Silence in those moments radiates strength. It communicates that you are governed by a deeper law, an inner law, not by the shifting opinions of the crowd. Neville often reminded his listeners, no one to change but self. When you try to explain yourself, you are trying to change the outer world, trying to shift the shadow instead of shifting the source. But silence redirects your focus inward. Instead of defending your position, you step back into the creative center of your consciousness and adjust the state from which your experience flows. The outer world, being only a reflection, eventually aligns without effort. In the stillness of silence, you can assume the state of the person who does not need justification, a person rooted in self-confidence, clarity, and inner authority. You begin to feel the truth of this identity, and as you persist in this state, the world will reflect your inner solidity. People will treat you differently, not because you told them to, but because your state has changed. You have shifted from seeking validation to embodying it. Silence also protects the seed of your desire while it is still tender. When you explain your dreams, your plans, or your inner visions to others too early, you expose them to doubt, misunderstanding, or mockery. These reactions can weaken your faith in your own assumptions. Neville taught that desire is sacred. It must be nurtured in the inner chamber of imagination until it becomes strong enough to withstand any outer reaction. Silence guards the seed of your desire. It allows your assumption to grow in the dark until it becomes a living reality. Remaining silent when you feel misunderstood is an art that reveals your spiritual maturity. You begin to see that nothing external has the authority to define you. Your definition of yourself is the only one that matters, and this definition is formed within, not through justification. Silence allows you to step back and ask, who do I choose to be right now? It redirects your awareness to the only place where true change occurs, your consciousness. In silence, you detach from the emotional charge that fuels the need for explanation. You find yourself grounded in presence, in the awareness that the opinion of another is merely a reflection of their own state, not a reflection of your identity. You see clearly that their perception is not your responsibility, nor is it your burden. Your responsibility is your inner state. Your burden is only the assumption you choose to hold. And this assumption, once chosen, does not need to be defended. It needs only to be lived. The more you practice silence during moments of justification, the more you experience a profound shift within yourself. You stop reacting to every ripple in the outer world. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing misunderstanding. You begin to carry yourself with quiet certainty, with the calmness of someone who knows that reality bends to their inner vision. This calmness becomes your foundation. It becomes the atmosphere of your consciousness. As this state deepens, life begins to respond differently. People approach you with more respect. Opportunities arise without being forced. Conflicts fade without confrontation. You begin to realize that silence is not emptiness. It is alignment. It is inner clarity. It is faith in action. Silence becomes your unspoken declaration. I am enough. I am whole. I am the creator of my reality. And when this truth settles into your being, you discover that the desire to justify yourself simply disappears. You no longer need the world to understand you. You no longer need anyone to agree with you. You move with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that the only understanding that shapes your life is your own. In this silence, you find freedom. You find power. You find the ability to remain unshaken in the face of misunderstanding, confident in the face of doubt, unwavering in the face of external noise. For you have discovered the truth that Neville taught so passionately: creation is an inward act, and silence is the guardian of that inner world. Stay silent in the moments when you feel the urge to justify yourself, and you will watch life shift, not because you convinced anyone, but because you return to the source of your true power, your imagination. There is a moment in life when silence is not merely wise, it is transformative. This moment arrives when you find yourself confronted by negativity, criticism, or hostility. Whether it comes from strangers, loved ones, or your own internal dialogue, the temptation to respond, defend, or retaliate can be overwhelming. But Neville Goddard taught that your reactions are not responses to the world. They are creative acts that shape the world. Every emotional expression, every word spoken from a state of agitation, reinforces the very condition you wish to escape. Silence in these moments becomes your shield and your sculptor. It protects you from the pull of the old state, and it shapes the new one you are stepping into. When negativity approaches you, It is nothing more than the echo of your former assumptions, reflected in the behavior of others. The world has no life of its own, it mirrors back to you the state you occupy. If you respond with anger or fear, you fall back into the old state and recreate the very reality you desire to change. But when you remain silent, calm, centered, inwardly aligned, you refuse to renew the contract with the old version of yourself. Silence dissolves the agreement that once tied you to conflict. In silence, you walk away energetically, even before you walk away physically. To stay silent in the face of negativity is to declare that your inner world is more real than the external disturbance. Silence is not retreat, it is mastery. When you do not react, you refuse to be moved from your chosen state. You become the still mountain that no storm can shake. In that stillness, your inner assumptions regain their strength. You anchor yourself once again in your wish fulfilled. Neville often said that imagination creates reality, and your reactions reveal what you truly imagine to be true. When you react with frustration, you imagine yourself powerless. When you react with fear, you imagine yourself threatened. When you react with anger, you imagine yourself at war with the world. But when you remain silent, when you inhale deeply and refuse to be pulled into the drama, you imagine yourself sovereign. You imagine yourself unmoved. You imagine yourself in full command of your inner kingdom. And it is from this inner kingdom that your outer world is shaped, molded, and ultimately transformed. Silence in the presence of negativity does not mean suppressing your emotions. It means refusing to express from the lower state. It means giving yourself the space to shift your inner atmosphere before you speak or act. What you do in silence is far more important than anything you could say aloud. In silence, you choose the state you want to embody. You choose who you want to be in that moment. You step back into the awareness that you are the operant power, and nothing outside you has the authority to disturb the state you assume, unless you grant it permission. Negativity is a test, a divine invitation to rise above old patterns. Every time someone provokes you, life is asking, are you still the person you used to be, or have you become someone new? Your silence becomes the answer. Through silence you say, I am no longer bound to the old reactions. I now operate from a higher state. Silence in these moments is like stepping behind the curtain of the theater of life. You withdraw from the scene, not physically perhaps, but energetically. You go behind the stage where the real work is done in consciousness. Here you choose again. You select the feeling of peace, of confidence, of abundance, of inner harmony. You step into the version of yourself that negativity cannot touch. And as you assume this new self, the world changes, because you have changed. When negativity meets silence, it loses its fuel. Conflict requires participation to survive. Drama needs your emotional energy to continue. But silence cuts the cord. When you do not engage, the negativity has nothing to feed on. It collapses, it dissolves, it often transforms completely. And sometimes, the outer world shifts instantly. Words soften, situations calm, people adjust themselves. Other times, nothing visible happens immediately, but a shift occurs beneath the surface. Energetic ties loosen, old dynamics break, new pathways open. People may assume your silence is weakness, but this is only because they do not understand the laws of consciousness. Silence is the stance of the one who knows that creation happens from within, not from reaction. The one who understands this law does not fight with shadows, they change the light source. They change the state. They hold the end within them, and the world aligns in due time. In silence, you are not accepting negativity, you are transcending it. You are refusing to recreate it. You are standing firm in your chosen identity. If you decide to be someone who lives in harmony, abundance, and inner peace, then negativity has no place in your kingdom. Your silence is the declaration of this truth. It is the royal decree that no longer entertains disorder. Neville taught that you must always feel the wish fulfilled. But how can one remain in the feeling of the wish fulfilled if they are constantly battling external disturbances? Silence becomes the guardian of your desired state. It shields the feeling you have chosen to embody. It prevents you from speaking words that would contradict your assumption. It allows you to remain loyal to your vision when the world offers you reasons to abandon it. When you meet negativity with silence, you are saying, I do not accept this as my truth. I will not energize this appearance. I remain in the state of my fulfilled desire. This is emotional discipline. This is spiritual strength. This is creative power. And in time you will notice a profound shift happening in your life. Negativity begins to lose its place in your world. Situations that once provoked you lose their sting. People who thrived on conflict can no longer hook into your energy. You stop attracting the same patterns because you no longer feed them. This is not coincidence. It is the natural consequence of occupying a higher state and refusing to descend through reaction. Silence is the invisible shield that protects your rising consciousness. It is the refusal to let the outer world dictate who you are. When you stay silent in moments of negativity, you step into a new realm of power. You are no longer governed by appearances, you become the creator of appearances. You no longer react to the world, you command it by the state you occupy. In this silence, you discover your true authority. You discover that peace is not a gift from the world, it is a gift you give to yourself. You discover that negativity has no power except the power you lend it. And you discover that the world transforms effortlessly when you remain loyal to your inner vision. Stay silent when negativity approaches, and you will watch your life shift. Not by force, but by the quiet strength of a consciousness that has remembered its creative power. There is a sacred moment in every creator's life when silence becomes the bridge between the unseen and the seen. This moment arrives when you are on the edge of manifestation, when your desire is near completion, yet nothing in the outer world seems to confirm it. The temptation at this stage is immense. You want to speak of your desire, to seek reassurance, to ask for signs, to express frustration, to question the process. But Neville Goddard taught that the final stage of manifestation requires the greatest discipline, the discipline of silence. Not silence as inactivity, but silence as unwavering faith in the unseen reality you have already accepted as true. When you plant a seed in the ground, you do not dig it up every day to check its progress. You leave it undisturbed. The same principle governs spiritual creation. When you impress your desire upon your imagination and feel its reality, that desire is planted deep within the subconscious mind. If you speak too soon, if you express doubt, frustration, or impatience, you uproot the seed. Words spoken from disbelief weaken the inner conviction, but silence preserves it. Silence protects the wish fulfilled from the winds of doubt. Silence allows the unseen to take shape without interference. There is a spiritual stillness that arises when you stay silent in the final stretch of manifestation. It is the quiet knowing that what you desire is already yours. You do not look for signs, you do not chase confirmation, you do not measure progress. You rest in the awareness that everything is unfolding perfectly. This silence is not passive, it is deeply creative. It is the silence of someone who has shifted states and refuses to return to the old one by speaking words that contradict the new identity. Neville often said that feeling is the secret, but feeling must be maintained. And there is no greater destroyer of the feeling of the wish fulfilled than speaking from a state of doubt. Every complaint, every question, every expression of fear reinforces the old reality, but silence keeps you loyal to the new state. Silence holds you steady when the outer world does not yet show evidence. Silence reminds you that imagination, not appearances, is the source of all creation. To remain silent when your desire is close but invisible is a profound act of faith. It is the moment you declare without words, I trust the law. You turn inward. You abandon the senses. You rely solely on the internal vision you have sustained. You become the one who walks in the certainty of the unseen. And in that inner certainty, the outer world is compelled to align. Silence in this phase is a form of spiritual gestation. It is the incubation of the new reality within you. Just as a child grows in the darkness of the womb, your manifestation grows in the silence of your mind. No one sees it yet. You cannot touch it. There is no evidence, but it is forming, structuring itself, preparing for expression. Any premature interference, worry, doubt, contradiction can disrupt the process. But silence protects it. Silence nourishes it. Silence gives it the space it needs to become tangible. This silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the fullness of belief, of embodied conviction. You feel the reality of the wish fulfilled so deeply that words become unnecessary. You move through your day with quiet assurance. You are no longer trying to attract your desire. You are living from it. You act, speak, and think as though it is already done, because in imagination it is done. And imagination is the only creative power. When you stay silent, you avoid the trap of discussing your desire with others who may not share your belief. Their doubts, even if unspoken, can pull you away from your inner certainty. Neville warned against sharing your desires with those who do not understand the law. They may not intentionally discourage you, but their skepticism can weaken your faith. Silence protects you from external influences that could distort your inner vision. The silence you practice at this stage also reveals something extraordinary. The world begins to move without your effort. You find yourself being led gently, often unexpectedly, toward the fulfillment of your desire. Conversations unfold, doors open, paths appear, but these are not forced or engineered. They arise naturally from the state you occupy. The silence you maintain gives the subconscious mind room to orchestrate everything on your behalf. There is a quiet surrender that comes with this silence. Not surrender as defeat, but surrender as release. You release control not because you are giving up, but because you understand that the creative work is already complete in imagination. The outer world is simply catching up. Your silence becomes the language of trust. It signals that you have moved beyond wanting and entered the realm of having. Silence at this stage becomes a kind of inner celebration. You may not speak of your desire, but you feel its presence. You carry it within you like a secret treasure. You walk differently. You breathe differently. You think differently. You feel the reality of the new state so deeply that you no longer need the world to confirm it. You have already confirmed it within yourself, and that confirmation is enough. The world will follow in due time. There will be moments when doubt whispers to you, urging you to speak, to question, to analyze. But you remain silent. You recognize that the whisper is the echo of old assumptions, not the truth. You return gently to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You choose silence over reaction, stillness over fear, faith over uncertainty. This is the discipline that separates the deliberate creator from the habitual reactor. This is the discipline that turns imagination into reality. And then, almost without warning, the manifestation arrives. It slips quietly into your life, often in such a natural way that you may forget the silence that birthed it. You realize that the moment you stopped speaking from doubt, the moment you rested in silent conviction, the world began to rearrange itself. You understand that silence was not inactivity. It was alignment. It was the final step in creation. Stay silent when your manifestation is near but unseen. Trust the unseen more than the seen. Protect your state with quiet faith. Let the world move in response to your inner certainty. And you will watch with a sense of awe as your desire emerges from the invisible into the visible. Exactly as you imagined it. Exactly when you were ready to receive it. There comes a moment on the spiritual journey when silence becomes more than a discipline. It becomes a revelation. This moment arrives when you are tempted to speak about your dreams, your visions, and the desires stirring within you long before their form has matured. Neville Goddard taught that creation begins in the unseen chambers of imagination, and if you reveal your desires too soon, before they have taken root within, you expose them to forces that can weaken or distort them. The desire, still tender, still forming, must be held in sacred silence until it becomes strong enough to withstand the opinions, doubts, and limitations of others. This silence is not secrecy out of fear, but protection out of wisdom. When you speak prematurely about what you are creating within, you shift your attention from feeling the end to seeking validation. You move from internal certainty to external confirmation, and the moment you look outward for acknowledgement, the power of your assumption is divided. You begin to care about how others perceive your dream. You begin to consider their beliefs, their logic, their fears. These external influences infiltrate the inner state you have crafted and weaken the emotional foundation upon which manifestation is built. Silence prevents this dilution. Silence keeps the energy of your desire concentrated, pure, and undisturbed. Neville taught that the subconscious mind is impressionable, absorbing every feeling you sustain with conviction. But it is also delicate in the early stages of creation. If you speak from a place of uncertainty, or if you allow others to introduce doubt, you undo the work you have done in imagination. The seed is uprooted, not because it lacked the power to grow, but because it was not protected long enough to develop roots. This is why silence is essential. The desire must remain in the solitude of your inner garden until it becomes real to you. so real that no opinion, no criticism, no disbelief can weaken it. In silence, your imagination does its greatest work. You revisit your desire in the secrecy of your mind. You feel its reality. You walk, breathe, and live in the end. There are no voices questioning you, no external judgments to distract you, no emotional turbulence to distort the feeling. Silence becomes the womb where the unseen is nurtured into form. Just as a mother protects the life within her before it is ready to enter the world, you guard your desire until it is mature enough to be expressed without vulnerability. Silence also reveals your relationship with your own desire. If you feel compelled to announce it, to seek reassurance, or to gather approval, then the desire has not yet become your inner truth. You do not truly believe you already have what you seek. You are still trying to convince yourself through the reactions of others. But when you keep your desire within, when you speak only in imagination and not aloud, you strengthen your faith. You keep the focus on your inner world, where all creation begins. You begin to feel the desire so deeply that speaking about it becomes unnecessary. It becomes part of you, a natural extension of your inner identity. Neville often emphasized that imagining creates reality, not announcing, not explaining, not justifying. Imagination alone is the creative force, and imagination does its work in silence. Think of your most powerful moments of inspiration, clarity, or transformation. They came in silence, in stillness, in the quiet places of your mind, not in the noise of conversation, not in the explanations given to others. True creation happens within, not through discussion. There is also a psychological shift that happens when you remain silent. You stop living for the eyes of others. You stop shaping your dreams based on what seems acceptable or reasonable to the world. You begin to live from your own vision. You become the author of your life, rather than a character seeking approval from other characters. Silence returns you to the seat of authority within yourself. It reminds you that you are the operant power, that you impress upon consciousness, and consciousness expresses through the world. When you keep your desires silent, you also eliminate the energy of resistance. Others do not have the opportunity to contradict your assumptions. They do not have the chance to tell you it cannot be done, or that it has never happened before. You avoid absorbing their limitations. You prevent your mind from being pulled into arguments or explanations. The silence becomes a shield that protects your creation from the doubts of the collective. You stay aligned with your vision because no one has had the chance to pull you away from it. Yet, the most profound reason to stay silent is this: when the desire becomes natural within you, you no longer need to talk about it. Neville taught that when the feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes your state, you lose the desire to seek validation. You no longer wish to verbalize your intention because you are already living in its fulfillment. You speak about it only when it has become fact in your world, not before. You do not announce the seed, you announce the harvest. And when the harvest comes, it often arrives in such a natural, effortless, seamless way that you realize the silence was part of the magic. Because you did not chase signs, you allowed the desire to grow organically. Because you did not expose it to doubt, it remained pure. Because you did not seek reassurance, you strengthened your faith. Silence was the soil in which imagination did its work without interference. When the manifestation finally appears, it will feel inevitable. It will feel like the outer echo of the inner reality you upheld in silence. You will understand that the silence was not emptiness. It was preparation. It was alignment. It was the stillness from which your desire drew its life. Neville said, "Go into the silence and assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." This is the powerhouse of creation. This is the chamber where imagination hears your unspoken word. This is the space where reality is shaped before the world knows anything about it. Stay silent when the desire is still forming. Stay silent when others would question your possibility. Stay silent when you are learning to believe. Stay silent until the desire becomes part of you, until it lives within you with such certainty that no voice can uproot it. In that silence, you will feel the invisible threads of creation weaving your desire into the world of form. And when it manifests, when it crystallizes, then the world will see what you nurtured in the sanctuary of your imagination. They will marvel at the result, but only you will know the truth. It was silence, held with faith, that shaped the miracle.